Hello, everyone. This is Anime Uchihax, and today I'm bringing you an exciting new what-if scenario. What if Issei was a half-vampire, half-human hybrid? The war, the encounter, and a forbidden union. The world was on the brink of destruction. A war between vampires and humans raged on, each side desperate to gain the upper hand. Blood was spilled on both sides, and the once peaceful lands were now scarred with the aftermath of countless battles. The vampires, led by the powerful Crimsonbane clan, fought mercilessly to maintain their dominance, while the humans, united under various factions, fought back with equal determination. On one such battlefield, the skies were filled with smoke, and the ground was littered with the remnants of the fallen. The clash of steel and the screech of magic filled the air as vampires and humans fought for supremacy. Among the chaos, Kazumi, a fierce and skilled vampire from the Crimsonbane clan, stood tall. Her crimson eyes burned with the fury of her people as she tore through the human ranks, her sword flashing in the dim light. Kazumi's power was unmatched on the battlefield, and she cut through the enemy forces with a cold, ruthless precision. But despite her strength, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The war had gone on for far too long, and the cycle of bloodshed seemed endless. As she swung her blade and felled another soldier, she heard a voice. "Stop this madness." Kazumi stopped mid-swing, her eyes narrowing. A human? She turned to face the source of the voice, expecting another opponent to challenge her. Instead, she saw Raisin, a strong and determined human warrior. His armor was battered from battle, but his eyes held a fierce resolve. He was unlike any other human she had encountered on the battlefield. Raisin stepped forward, his sword lowered. "This war is tearing everything apart. We need to find a way to end it. This bloodshed won't bring peace." Kazumi's expression was unreadable as she studied him. "And what makes you think a human could possibly understand what we've been through?" Raisin stood firm. "Because I've seen it all. I've lost everything to this war, my family, my friends. I've fought for years, but there's got to be another way." Kazumi's gaze softened for just a moment. For the first time in a long while, she felt doubt. "You're asking for the impossible. Vampires and humans have been enemies for centuries. You think we can just end that?" Raisin shook his head. "Maybe we can't change the past, but we can stop it from continuing. Together, we can find a way to stop the bloodshed." Kazumi didn't respond immediately. She looked around at the destruction, at the bodies of both vampires and humans scattered across the battlefield. The fight seemed pointless now. Perhaps there was some truth to what Raisin said. Perhaps there was a way to change things. "Perhaps you're right," she said, her voice quieter now. "But it will take more than just words. It will take action. Can you truly change the fate of both our races?" Raisin looked at her with unwavering determination. "I believe we can. But it starts with us." In that moment, something shifted. Kazumi and Raisin, despite their differences, saw in each other something that had been missing in their lives, a glimmer of hope. And in the midst of war, a forbidden bond began to form between them. As time passed, Kazumi and Raisin continued to meet in secret, their bond growing stronger. What started as an alliance to end the war soon blossomed into something deeper. Despite the dangers, despite the rules of their respective worlds, they found solace in each other's arms. Their love was forbidden, but neither could deny the feelings they had. But the more they met, the more their enemies closed in. Kazumi knew the vampire factions would never accept this union. Humans, too, would never understand. But she couldn't ignore the strength Raisin gave her, the strength to believe that perhaps a new future could be born from their love. One night, in the quiet of a secluded cave, Kazumi and Raisin shared a rare moment of peace. The outside world seemed so far away as they spoke of dreams, of a world beyond war, beyond hatred. Kazumi's hand rested gently on her stomach, where the life she carried began to grow. She had yet to tell Raisin, but she could feel it, something incredible was coming. Raisin sat beside her, his gaze steady. "Do you think we can really change the world?" Kazumi smiled softly, looking out into the distance. "I don't know. But I know that together, we can try." Months later, in a hidden home far from the prying eyes of their enemies, Kazumi gave birth to a child, Issei. His birth was not an ordinary event. From the moment he was born, a surge of power rippled through the room, a force that neither Kazumi nor Raisin could comprehend. Issei was no ordinary child. He was the product of a forbidden union, a hybrid of vampire and human blood. And with that power came both great potential and grave danger. Kazumi held her newborn son in her arms, her heart filled with both love and fear. "You're a special child, Issei. A blend of two worlds." Raisin stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "How is he? What's happening?" Kazumi's expression was one of concern. "His powers, they awakened too quickly. We need to be careful." Raisin's gaze softened. "We'll protect him. No matter what, he's our son. We won't let anyone take him from us." Kazumi nodded, but she knew the truth. The vampire factions would soon learn of Issei's existence, and they would stop at nothing to claim him for themselves. They would see him as a weapon, a tool to wield in their ongoing war. And the humans would never accept him, fearing his hybrid nature. Together, Kazumi and Raisin knew they had to protect Issei. But the war that had torn their worlds apart was far from over. And Issei, born from a forbidden union, would be the key to changing everything. The awakening of the hybrid. The years passed, and the world around Issei remained in turmoil. The war between vampires and humans showed no signs of stopping, and the peace that Kazumi and Raisin had hoped for seemed like an impossible dream. Despite their best efforts to protect their son, the factions of both vampires and humans had begun to take notice of Issei. Word had spread that a child, born of both vampire and human blood, had the potential to shift the balance of power. Kazumi and Raisin knew that they could no longer keep Issei hidden for much longer. A hidden training ground. Issei, now 10 years old, stood alone in a hidden training ground deep within the forest. His eyes glowed with an unnatural crimson hue as he focused, trying to harness the power that lay dormant within him. He had always known that he was different, that there was something deep inside him that set him apart from other children. His vampire heritage gave him strength, speed, and healing abilities beyond the ordinary human, but there was something else. Something more dangerous. The human side of him was constantly at odds with the darkness that his vampire blood brought. His powers were unpredictable, often manifesting in bursts of violence, leaving him shaken and confused. Kazumi and Raisin had trained him to control the urges, but the constant pressure weighed heavily on the young boy. Issei, clenching his fists, "Why can't I control it? Why is it always so much stronger than me?" He turned, his eyes narrowing as he faced a training dummy, made from sturdy branches and cloth. He gritted his teeth and focused, drawing on the vampire blood coursing through his veins. A deep, overwhelming power surged from within, and with a single swipe, he tore the dummy apart. The force of the strike caused the ground beneath him to crack. But as quickly as the power came, it began to fade, leaving Issei panting and trembling. Issei, breathing heavily, "This power, it's too much." Just then, Kazumi appeared from the shadows, her expression one of concern. She had always been protective of Issei, but she knew that the day would come when he would need to learn to control his powers, or they would consume him. "Kazumi," softly, "Issei, you've been pushing yourself too hard. You need to learn to pace yourself. Power like yours cannot be wielded in haste." Issei, frustrated, "But I don't know how else to stop it. It just keeps happening, and I feel like I'm losing control every time." Kazumi walked up to him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Kazumi, calmly, "You're not alone in this. I've seen the strength in you, Issei. You've inherited the power of the Crimson Bane clan, but you are also human. Both sides are battling inside you, and it will take time to find balance. You need to understand that your power is both a gift and a curse. It is not something that can be controlled through force alone." Raisin arrived at the scene, watching silently as Kazumi spoke to their son. The years of hiding had been taxing on them all, and it was becoming increasingly difficult to protect Issei from the outside world. He stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Raisin, stoically, Kazumi's right. You have to understand the power within you, Issei. The more you fight it, the more it will fight back. You need to learn to embrace both sides of who you are. Only then can you begin to control your abilities." Issei turned to his father, eyes filled with a mix of fear and confusion. "Issei, quietly, how do I do that?" Raisin, nodding, "We'll train you. But not just to fight. We'll teach you how to understand yourself. You're not just a weapon, Issei. You're a bridge between two worlds." The factions approach. Unbeknownst to Kazumi, Raisin, and Issei, the vampire factions had learned of the hybrid child's existence. The Crimson Bane clan, ever protective of its lineage, had grown increasingly concerned about the potential threat Issei posed. They feared that his power, if left unchecked, could surpass their own, threatening the very foundation of vampire rule. The humans, too, had become aware of the hybrid, seeing him as both a potential weapon to be used or a threat to be eliminated. One evening, as Issei trained, a figure cloaked in darkness appeared at the edge of their forest home. The figure was a high-ranking vampire noble, sent by the Crimson Bane clan to assess the situation. Vampire noble, in a cold, calculating voice, "I've come for the child." Kazumi stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she recognized the figure. Kazumi, with a controlled fury, "You can't have him." Vampire noble, smirking, "The boy is too dangerous. He is a threat to the vampire factions, to us all. The Crimson Bane clan demands his return." Kazumi, defiantly, "He is my son. I will not allow you to take him. He is not your weapon." Raisin stood beside Kazumi, his hand gripping his sword as he prepared for a fight. The air was thick with tension as both sides prepared for conflict. The fight and Issei's awakening. The battle that ensued was swift and brutal. Kazumi and Raisin fought with everything they had to protect their son, but the vampire noble was no ordinary opponent. He was a master of dark magic and had centuries of combat experience. He easily matched Kazumi's strength, using his powers to manipulate shadows and control the very blood of his enemies. Raisin, too, struggled against the vampire's strength, but he was determined to protect his family at all costs. As the battle raged on, Issei's emotions surged. He could feel the power within him awakening again, stronger than ever before. His heart raced as the battle outside grew more intense, and he knew that his parents were in danger. Issei, shouting in fear, "No! I can't let them hurt you." Without warning, Issei's power exploded outward. His body glowed with a fierce, red aura, his vampire blood manifesting in full force. The ground beneath him cracked, and a shockwave of energy sent the vampire noble flying backward. The air around them vibrated with the intensity of Issei's power as he stood, eyes glowing with the full force of his hybrid nature. Vampire noble, gasping, struggling to rise, "Impossible, how can a child possess such power?" Kazumi and Raisin stared in shock as Issei stood before them, his power completely uncontrolled. But in that moment, they realized the truth. Issei was not just their son, he was a force that could change the world. His strength, his potential, was beyond anything they had ever imagined. The rising tide. As the battle between Kazumi, Raisin, and the vampire noble came to a close, Issei's power began to wane. His body trembled, and his glowing red aura slowly faded, but the damage had already been done. The vampire noble lay unconscious on the ground, defeated by the sheer intensity of the hybrid's power. Issei stood, breathing heavily, staring at his hands in disbelief. Issei, breathing hard, did I do that? Kazumi rushed to her son's side, her expression a mix of concern and pride. Kazumi, gently, you did, Issei. But you must learn to control it. This power, it's more than just a weapon. It's a part of who you are, and if you don't learn to master it, it will consume you. Raisin walked up to them, wiping the blood from his sword. His eyes were filled with a quiet understanding, as if he had known that this day would come. Raisin, nodding, Kazumi's right. We've trained you to survive, Issei, but now we need to train you to control the forces inside you. You've shown us what you're capable of, but you still don't understand the consequences of your power. Issei lowered his head, guilt and fear swirling in his chest. Issei, softly, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to protect you both. Kazumi pulled him into a hug, her voice soothing. Kazumi, gently, and you did, Issei. But your power is dangerous. If we don't teach you to control it, the world will see you as a threat. We must be careful who we trust. The arrival of the vampire factions. Unbeknownst to them, the news of Issei's power spread quickly. The factions of the vampire world, each with their own motives, began to take an interest in the hybrid child. The Crimson Bane clan, the most powerful and influential faction, saw Issei as a potential weapon, one who could tip the balance of power in their favor. They would stop at nothing to claim him for themselves. At the same time, the other vampire factions, both rival and allied to the Crimson Bane clan, also began to take notice of the hybrid's potential. Some viewed him as a threat to their rule, while others saw an opportunity to harness his power for their own gain. The delicate balance between the factions was about to be shattered, and Issei would be at the center of it all. Kazumi and Raisin, aware of the growing danger, knew they had to act quickly. They had spent years hiding Issei from the world, but the time for hiding was over. The world was changing, and their son would need to be prepared for the battles ahead. Raisin, firmly, we can't hide anymore. The factions are coming for you, Issei. You're not just a child anymore. You're a weapon, and you need to learn how to use it. Kazumi looked at her husband, the weight of their situation settling in. Kazumi, softly, but we can't do this alone. We need allies. The factions will come after us with everything they have. If we don't find a way to protect Issei, they'll destroy everything we've worked for. Raisin, determined, will find allies. There are those who oppose the Crimson Bane clan and the other factions. We can't trust everyone, but there are some who may help us. Training and preparation. Kazumi and Raisin began to train Issei harder than ever before, teaching him how to tap into his powers while controlling the rage and darkness that often accompanied them. The boy's natural potential was undeniable, but his emotions often got in the way. His fear, confusion, and anger were powerful motivators, but they also clouded his judgment. Issei, gritting his teeth, in frustration, I can't keep doing this. Every time I try, I feel like I'm going to lose control again. Kazumi stood before him, her expression stern yet understanding. Kazumi, calmly, control doesn't come from force, Issei. It comes from understanding your emotions and your power. If you let your emotions control you, your power will be a danger to everyone around you. But if you learn to control them, then you can control your power. Raisin nodded, his eyes focused on his son. Raisin, seriously, we'll start with the basics again. You need to understand your body, your mind, and your bloodline. Your human side and your vampire side aren't enemies, Issei. They're both a part of you. And together, they make you stronger. The vampire factions clash. As Issei continued his training, the vampire factions began to make their move. A delegation from the Crimson Bane clan arrived at Kazumi and Raisin's secluded home, led by a powerful vampire lord named Aldrich. He was a cold, calculating individual who had no qualms about using force to get what he wanted. Aldrich, flanked by several powerful vampire warriors, stood at the entrance to their home, his eyes locked onto Issei. Aldrich, in a low, chilling voice, "You're the one who's been hiding the hybrid child. The Crimson Bane clan demands his presence." Kazumi and Raisin stood between their son and the vampire lord, ready for battle. Kazumi, defiantly, "You won't have him. He's not a tool for your power games." Raisin, with cold determination, "We won't let you take him." Aldrich's eyes narrowed, his patience wearing thin. Aldrich, commanding, "Then you leave us no choice. We'll take him by force." The battle erupted as the vampire warriors charged at Raisin and Kazumi, their speed and strength overwhelming. The clash of weapons rang through the air as Kazumi and Raisin fought with all their might to protect Issei. But in the heat of the battle, Issei felt the power within him surge again. His heart raced as his emotions flared, fear, anger, and the need to protect his parents. He couldn't hold it in any longer. With a cry, he unleashed his power, his hybrid form manifesting in a burst of red energy. The ground shook as Issei's power erupted, throwing the vampire warriors back with immense force. Aldrich, stunned by the sheer power of the boy, watched as Issei stood tall before him, his eyes glowing with a dangerous intensity. Aldrich, in disbelief, "So, this is the true power of the hybrid." The struggle for control. The battle raged on as the Crimson Bane warriors staggered back, the ground still trembling from the shockwave Issei had unleashed. His body crackled with intense energy, his red eyes glowing like fiery orbs, a mixture of vampire and human powers coursing through his veins. His hybrid form, unleashed in a moment of raw emotion, made him seem both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Aldrich, calmly assessing Issei's power, "Impressive. But power like that can be dangerous, even for you, child." Issei, panting heavily, stood at the epicenter of the chaos. His body burned with an overwhelming energy, and his emotions were on the verge of consuming him. He could feel the beast inside, urging him to let go, to unleash even more destruction. But Kazumi's voice echoed in his mind, reminding him of her teachings, of control. Kazumi, shouting, "Issei! Don't lose yourself. You're stronger than this." Raisin stepped forward, his sword drawn, eyes locked onto Aldrich with a fierce resolve. Raisin, angrily, "You want him? You'll have to go through me first." Kazumi rushed to Issei's side, her face filled with concern. She could see the struggle in his eyes, the fear of losing control once again. Kazumi, gently, "Issei, listen to me. You are not alone in this. We are here to help you." But Issei's breathing grew more erratic as his powers flared even further, and he seemed unable to hear her through the deafening roar of his own rage and confusion. Issei, shouting, "I don't know how to control it, Mom. I don't know how." Raisin, sensing the urgency, glanced at Kazumi. He knew they had no time to waste. If they didn't act fast, the battle could escalate to a point beyond control. Raisin, commanding, "Issei, focus on your breathing. Feel the connection between your vampire side and your human side. They are two halves of the same whole." Kazumi, calmly, "You're not just a weapon, Issei. You're our son. You can control this. We believe in you." The words pierced through the chaos inside Issei's mind, helping him focus. Slowly, he began to calm down, taking deep, slow breaths. The burning power within him began to subside, and his red eyes softened, no longer filled with the wild, uncontrollable rage. Aldrich, sensing the shift in power, raised his hand, signaling his warriors to stand down. His cold, calculating expression never faltered, but there was a slight hint of respect in his eyes. Aldrich, to Issei, coldly, "Impressive. You may not be a weapon just yet, but you could become one. That's why the Crimson Bane clan is interested in you." Kazumi stepped forward, placing herself between Issei and Aldrich, her voice unwavering. Kazumi, defiantly, he is not a weapon, Aldrich. And you will never have him. We've already made our choice. Raisin, firmly, if you want a fight, you'll have to get through both of us. A tense silence followed, the threat of violence hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Aldrich studied the situation carefully, his mind calculating. It was clear that Kazumi and Raisin would not back down easily, but there was also the matter of Issei's overwhelming potential. This was a battle he would have to approach with caution. Aldrich, after a long pause, very well. We will not take him by force today. But remember, you've made an enemy of the Crimson Bane clan. The next time we meet, there will be no mercy. With a nod to his warriors, Aldrich and his group turned to leave, but not without casting one last, calculating glance at Issei. Aldrich, coldly, we will be watching you, hybrid. You cannot hide from your destiny. After the battle. As the dust settled, Kazumi and Raisin approached Issei, who stood silently, still shaken by the raw power he had unleashed. His heart raced, and he could feel the pulse of his hybrid nature within him, restless and unpredictable. Kazumi, softly, Issei, you did well. You're learning to control it. But you still have a long way to go. Raisin, placing a hand on his shoulder, you've proven that you have what it takes, Issei. But you need to focus. Your powers are a gift, but also a burden. You can't afford to lose control again. Issei nodded, looking down at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. The weight of his newfound powers was heavy, and the fear of losing control, of hurting those he cared about, was almost unbearable. Issei, quietly, I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to hurt anyone. Kazumi knelt down in front of him, lifting his chin so that their eyes met. Her voice was gentle but firm. Kazumi, softly, you're not alone in this, Issei. We will teach you, guide you. But you need to trust us. You need to trust yourself. Raisin, with a reassuring smile, you're not just a hybrid. You're our son. And that's something no one can take away from you. Issei's gaze softened, and he nodded. The road ahead was uncertain, but he wasn't alone. His parents were with him, and together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Well, that's the end of this what if scenario. If you'd like to see more or have any thoughts on the story, feel free to leave a comment below. Don't forget to share it with friends who love what if scenarios. Thanks for reading, and I'll see you all soon.